And now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for the evening. Oscar Munoz is the Chief Executive Officer of United Airlines and has served on the board of directors of United Continental Holdings since 2010. Before United, Oscar served as President and Chief Operating Officer of CSX Corporation, a premier freight transportation company. He also previously worked in various financial and strategic capacities for some of the world's most recognized consumer brands, including AT&T, Coca-Cola Enterprises, and PepsiCo. And he told me he loves consumer brands. Now, originally from California, Oscar is eldest of 9 children and the first person in his family to graduate from college. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Southern California and his MBA from Pepperdine University. He remains active in several philanthropic and educational organizations, including the University of North Florida's Board of Trustees. Oscar is a member of the Economic Club and the Commercial Club. And Oscar was named one of the 100 most influential Hispanics by Hispanic Magazine, Business Magazine, and has a great story of overcoming adversity. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Oscar Munoz.
Hello, Chicago. Thank you, Ilene, and for all of you in the club. It's been a wonderful reception to tonight's evening for me, as well as to this wonderful, great city. I was stressing a little bit over the course of this weekend. My worst case scenario was Cubs take it to 7 games, lose a nail biter on Sunday night, and I got to address Chicago on Monday. You know, it's, I'm so excited about the Cubs. I've been a lifelong Dodger fan. Well, no. I'm a lifelong Dodger fan, and I was conflicted, as you might think, with regards to the converging of these two great teams. And I knew Saturday evening when that grand slam went out that I was a Cubs fan. So, go Cubbies. I'm just glad they're not playing tonight because I'm not sure I or anybody can compete with them, and I'm hoping Cleveland can't compete with them either. So, listen, as I was looking at the people on the days and talking with folks earlier, I noticed and am glad that our 2 deputy mayors are here tonight, Steve and Andy. I'm very happy to see you because, as some of you may know, about a year ago, I suffered a pretty severe heart attack that required transplant surgery a few months later. The last meeting, the last active business session that I had was with the mayor. So when I say I'm happy to see the both of you here, and tell them I said that. But listen, to the city of Chicago, a very sincere thank you. The outpouring of good wishes my family and I received from this community while I was sick is something we'll never forget, and certainly will always be grateful for. And I love the city. Now, I'm in the customer service business, and I get lots of input, lots of conversations, lots of emails and notes from our customers. And so in that spirit, to the civic and business leaders of this great town, if I had one smidgen, one slight little bit of suggestion for all of you, would be simply, could we actually name things the way we don't, the bean is not the bean. The cell apparently is no longer the cell. This is an interesting one. Taking LSD means something completely different here. And people aren't sure whether to call the place I work Sears Tower or Willis Tower. No one really wants to say the other tower that's in town. That's as politically incorrect as I'm allowed to be. And frankly, the Picasso statue doesn't even have a name. So just a smidgen of that. One day, about a year ago, when I was a little bit over a year ago, when I was headed to work, I told my Uber driver to go to the United building. I'd forgotten our address. Yeah. I found an aptly named statue, Michael Jordan, but it was at the United Center, nowhere near 233 South Wacker. But listen, there's just so many reasons to fall in love with this city, from the art, the architecture, the museum, the music, the food, the festivals, all those incredible things that happen in this great city. But above all, what I have found, and people know that about the Midwest, but I found it particularly in Chicago, is that the people are truly what makes this town great. And as I've settled in, your kindness, your generosity of spirit has put the home in sweet home Chicago for me and my family. And we are proud to be, sorry Tom, Chicago's hometown airline. Now, as the hometown airline, there is certain responsibility that comes with it, certainly. And even though we operate around a global basis, we do consider this our home. And we truly believe that charity starts at home. And I've made it a part of our core mission at United to serve Chicago and its communities. And I look forward to bringing my passion for two issues here to the city: expanding access to early childhood education and providing scholarships for kids like me who were the first in their families to go to college. So the two things that I found. You know, the great public-private partnerships you forge here in the city have made the city of Chicago kind of the gold standard for those two items, so I'm glad to participate. And then, in addition to that, due to recent health events, I've also become sort of an avid supporter of all things medical. And so at Northwestern Hospital in particular, so Dean, to you and your great staff there, it's been an amazing process, so thank you. So Chicago, from your work on boards, foundations, raising money for the Chicago public school system, after-school programs, redeveloping and revitalizing our neighborhoods, Andy, and things that you guys do there. I've seen what this community does and the standard you've set. I'm here tonight to say that from now on, as you will see us as United as a more active partner, led by our executive team, which is sitting here on 8 and 29, and our collective task to build this city worthy of the next generation. And this task has always been, as I hear, the task of this economic club, reaching all the way back to its start and its founding in 1927, which was an auspicious year for both of us because in that year, on July 2nd, a Boeing Model 40 aircraft left Chicago en route to San Francisco. It was carrying a bag of U.S. first-class mail and an intrepid young reporter named Jane Eads from the old Herald-Examiner. Now, that flight would make her America's first official airline passenger, as well as the very first passenger of a carrier service that would eventually become us, United Airlines. So we share that together. Now, interestingly enough, one of her notes from the diary in which she wired back to her editors, it's interesting because it could be written today. She writes, "We're running into wild weather again. The pilot reports we might have to circle for a while." Yeah, when it comes to flying, not a lot of things change in and out of Chicago, right? If you allow me a few minutes, you saw the commercial, the video that we put together. It's been an exciting year for our company and an exciting year for the people inside our family. And to write the history of United's journey from that first flight back in 1927 to the nearly 200 planes that, as we speak, are pulling out of O'Hare, it is to sort of chronicle the history of Chicago as well. As the second city's #1 private employer in terms of size, with nearly 15,000 men and women based in Chicago, we kind of view the future of our company and the future of this city as a common endeavor that we will shape together. We're the largest carrier here in Chicago, and as our largest hub, O'Hare, it acts as the nerve center for our global network. So frankly, as O'Hare goes, so does the rest of our entire network. and operations worldwide. We've invested millions, actually billions of dollars at this airport over the past decade to ensure its long-term competitiveness. And we will continue working with the city on plans to modernize and expand both the airfield and the terminals. We have to ensure that this airport continues to serve as the engine for the local economy and our own personal growth at United. Now, you can see that commitment recently in our most recently remodeled clubs, the one you saw on the video, and a brand new one that we just opened over in B6. So I urge you to look at that one. That second one in B6, it's pretty special. We will be opening our brand new Polaris Club December 1st lounge by the end of this year, and as well opening another remodeled lounge over in C16. Now, this is where the commercial comes in. I know that many of you rely on those clubs for a little repose before you fly, and I appreciate your patience as we make those renovations to this club. Now, if I could, let's turn to the role that O'Hare plays in making Chicago the global commercial hub we know today, and home to the vibrant business community represented here tonight. As you know, Chicago's leading companies choose to locate here because of the educated workforce, the quality of life, and above all, a general central location. A lot of the folks that I've been talking with tonight, it's an easy place to get to a lot of different places if you want to. We relocate here for all those reasons, and again, probably not because of the weather. Thank you. They don't allow me many jokes in these things, but I get to speak freely later, so that's going to be really well. Those strengths with regards to the city of Chicago maintain the incredible diversity of Chicago's economy. No single sector, this is interesting news, no single sector makes up more than 14% of the business community here in Chicago. You can go down the list of Chicago's biggest companies and industries, and they are the same as United's most important corporate customers. Just look around the room tonight. There are leaders in sectors like healthcare with AbbVie, Baxter. There are firms, professional firms in the services like Accenture, BCG, Deloitte, EY, KPMG, McKinsey, PwC. There's a lot of money there. Sorry. Other blue chip companies that are headquartered here or around Chicago: Boeing, McDonald's, Motorola Solutions, Hyatt. I think Greg from Motorola is finally moving into town. Is that what I've heard? I went to visit him in Schaumburg. Do you know where Schaumburg is? Wow. Jeez. You know, I've lived in a lot of places and frankly all over the world, and what you see here in Chicago, and certainly over the past 15 years, is a bit of an explosion of investment banking, asset management, and private equity, which rival some of the places that I've lived on both coasts. And this is, I think, an important new distinction. And what was once seen as a flyover city for the tech industry has now become a launch pad for some of the most innovative digital companies in this country. And that's a huge, huge beginning for me. In all, there are about, as far as we could count, about 150 corporate accounts for us here tonight, representing each of them a leader in their respective industry, and representing, and this is an interesting tidbit, together those 150 accounts fly with us about 3 billion miles each year. That's how important air travel is, from a business perspective, from a product you receive, and from the great business community that you have here in Chicago. So I want to thank all those folks for all their business. And for the one or two of you that may fly other airlines, our corporate sales team is on table 29. Julia Haywood, will you raise your hand? You can see her. The point of this is the future of your company, the future of Chicago, and the future of my company, United, are all fundamentally linked. And I am certainly committed to making sure that we're doing our part to guarantee that our shared future is a successful one. So, how are we doing that? You saw a lot of it in the video, but there's so much more than that. When I came into this job a little more than a year ago, there were some dark clouds that we needed to pilot around. The question about United always seemed to be, what's wrong? Again. We inherited significant operational issues, serious customer satisfaction problems. Frankly, investors doubted me personally and my experience coming from outside the industry. Then there was that little matter of unwanted attention from federal investigators that, fortunately, we have successfully resolved. So long story short, I had a full inbox when I stepped into that corner office. And as you know, a lot of you in executive leadership, when you're in a turnaround mode, it's not hard. The trick isn't figuring out what to do. It's about knowing what to do first. It's about sequencing, timing. It's about separating the signal from the noise and distinguishing the symptoms from the real cause of the problem. So to figure that out, I did something unique, incredibly intelligent, and never heretofore done before. I simply listened. And we listened. Now, I know it's easy to say, but I'm telling you, it's hard to do. It's often talked about, but seldom followed through because it's tough, it's painful, and it's very time-consuming. I read hundreds of emails from customers telling me about their experience flying with us, taking the bad with the good. Now, it became quickly evident to me that I couldn't possibly manage all that input and all that inflow. So in partnership with the Edelman team, we introduced an online platform called Airtime. We've won awards for this because of its unique nature and all that stuff, but for me, what it meant, it allowed us to turn customer and employee feedback into concrete, actionable data that is starting to make a real difference. And that's such an important part. You listen, you learn, and then you lead. And that's the difference that we've made with regards to the things that we fixed, the things that you've asked us to fix. And so in addition to the world there, we also started a listening tour. I visited employees in break rooms, hangars, airports across the system. And now, some of these folks that work in our business, in our company, have been on the job for 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50 years. The pride that they have runs incredibly deep. The tempers can run very, very hot, and the questions can be very direct and incredibly blunt. Why? It's because they care. We used to characterize that as complaining, bitching, whining, moaning. They care. And when they care, and they care enough to share their issues, it's our job, it's our need to make sure we listen. One conversation that I'll share with you summed it kind of all up for me. And as part of this listening tour, I was coming back to Chicago, and I always walk around, talk to the pilots before we take off, and our flight attendants, and any customer that's nearby that wanted to yell at me at the time. And this flight attendant was in the galley, and I just turned the corner. I said, "Hi, and I'm Oscar." And I said, I'm just, what advice, what things could you tell me? In tears, ladies and gentlemen, she said, I'm just tired of having to say, I'm sorry. And that really struck home for me because, what it meant is that it's exhausting to have to apologize for a company you're proud of, to say I'm sorry for things that you can't control. A flight attendant can't control delays, Wi-Fi, or even the coffee we serve. But she does have to control the emotions of you as a customer when you ask her for something that you think is very simple, and all she can say is, I'm sorry. And that was the fundamental catalyst for me and my team with regards to how we went to work. Because clearly our people were disenchanted, certainly disenfranchised, and more importantly, they were disengaged. There was a crisis of trust that had built up over a long, long period of time. And only by listening could we learn an incredibly simple fact. We had lost our customers, primarily because we had lost our people. We needed to get them back before we could ever hope to meaningfully improve our operations and or our customer satisfaction. That is why, despite the concerns of many on the street, our investors and people and pundits around, I decided we needed to deliver industry-leading labor contracts for our employees. And I'm proud to say, as you saw in the video, we will have, hopefully by the end of this year, labor peace in this airline for the first time in over a decade. And that is a huge accomplishment, especially with the flight attendants who after 6 weeks. Now, I was on TV a couple weeks ago, and I invited the world, basically. The question was about metrics and what are the things you're following, how are you measuring things. And I said, listen, I invite you to fly us around. Ask any of our employees, anywhere they might be, how they're feeling about our company. And I'm confident that you will see that morale has improved, certainly, and it's inspired by a new spirit that is kind of difficult to define, but it's impossible. It's impossible not to feel. And that's what we're calling the new spirit of United. And it comes from just more than labor contracts and flexible work rules and tools and product that we offered. It comes from the meaning our people derive from providing you with quality service, first and foremost. And there's a dignity that comes from being treated like a professional. I come from a very blue-collar family. I've seen the slights of being a minority. I've seen all of that. I have learned throughout that from a lot of wonderful people that I've grown up with that if you treat others with human dignity and kindness and sort of an equal status, there's a lot of things that you can do. And so that's what we've done with our workforce. We've inspired and sparked that emotion. And then it also comes from the pride of ownership that comes from having played a role in making this brand turn around. So as a result of all of that, operational performance and customer satisfaction have improved greatly. You saw and heard some of the numbers there. And the reason for that is purely simple. Yes, we're an operating company, but we're also in the people business. And with more than 86,000 people, we need them to come into work every single day and do the right thing. They can't just be going through the motions. They also have to be experiencing the emotions they have to do in order to allow them to do the job, for the best job possible for you as a customer. Oftentimes that means going the extra mile. There's no question. And sometimes it's just simple as an added big smile, especially when things don't go particularly well. And that extra care is so important because we understand that we're involved in our customers' lives, in your lives, in a way very few industries are. I used to sell soda pop and telecom, and I moved freight for a living as well. And so I've had a lot of experience, but nowhere have I been able to touch human life so quickly because we're the ones you rely on when you just have to get to that business meeting, when you just have to make it to that family event, or simply when you just have to get home and kiss those kids goodnight. I get that. We get that. And it is a responsibility to you that we take incredibly seriously. An example of how we measure that or how we're thinking about this, we used to measure, still do measure, how many planes are delayed. It's a very important metric to us. But now we talk about how many passengers are delayed. It's not a product. An airplane is not a delay. The human people sitting inside that's the delay. That's the personal nature of our product, and that's what we have to measure and monitor. So that focus on the personal, individual dimension of our business was something I tried to bring home to our employees. But in one of these ironies of life, it was our employees that brought that message home really to me when I fell ill. And this is a difficult conversation that I always have at these meetings, at these conversations and speeches that we make, because I've often asked why I came back to the business after going through the things that I went through on the health-wise. And I wish I could explain the emotion of receiving thousands of letters from our United family. Now you have to remember, I was on the job for 37 days. I'd gone a lot of places, but there's no way in heck I went out and saw 86,000 people. Thousands of letters would pour into my hospital, into my apartment. Flowers, food. Jambalaya actually arrived one day. And as the medical community would tell you, there's no way that's getting in the hospital room. But here's the meaningful part for me and my family. My kids, my children, my family would bring the bag of mail from the night before and read it to me in the morning. The emotion, the crying, the outreach that was in the outpouring of affection that we all felt brought not only my family, my doctors, my nurses. There was a morning reading every single day. And there, ladies and gentlemen, there is where life-affirming ratification of what I've always believed in my life is that humans matter and human emotion, and capturing that can make a meaningful step in the right direction for a business, for yourself, for anyone. Those letters were incredibly meaningful to me. And while certainly those letters were an expression of goodwill for me personally, there was also an affirmation, again, of people's will to make United a company that they can take pride in which they have a real stake, and to put simply, for the first time in a long time, my United family felt hope. Now, hope is not a strategy, as we all say, right? It doesn't mean that their optimism was hanging on a hope and a prayer. It was rooted in a proof and a confidence that we had a renewed focus on the important things. Them, the employees, and you, our customers. Simple as that. A watchword, a phrase that we use at United is that proof matters more than promises. And so far, the proof is as clear as the numbers on that Wrigley Center Field scoreboard last Saturday night. And just like the Cubs are having a great October, United is having an incredible October. And we're going to be having the best ever record for on-time performance ever. And so the improvement is there, and we're going to top off the year with a record performance as well. Now, I am not under any illusion that those statistics make you feel better if it's your plane that's delayed. And trust me, I travel a lot, and my planes get delayed as well. I was sitting, I think, 34B at one point in time, and somebody noticed me and came over and wanted to complain about the fact that premium elite members don't get upgraded as much. And as she was talking to me, I looked at her and smiled and said, "Yeah, I know. Look where I'm sitting." So we are changing the conversation. I don't think we've changed it just yet. But inside the company, I'm promoting this concept that we've taken our company in a very short period of time to the earlier what's wrong to sort of an exciting what's next. And I've put in place an executive leadership team whose depth of experience and insight has grabbed the attention of the industry, won the approval of the street, and is making United the airline to watch in the coming years. So listening, learning, and then leading. That's been our simple philosophy. And we know we have a lot more work ahead of us, but frankly, I wouldn't trade the cards in my hand with those of any of our competitors. We just need to play those cards right. And when we do, it will win for our customers, certainly for our employees, and for all Chicago and all of you and all your companies that travel quite a bit. Because this city is known as the city that works. And that is thanks to the hard work of so many companies and civic leaders in this room. So we are committed to also being the airline that works. And we'll always be a partner and a pillar in building up the city of big shoulders. That's the history we share. That's the future we will shape together. So thank you for your time, for your attention, and for your business.
Well, thank you, Oscar, for those remarks. And I have a lot of questions. Okay, so let me start off. First of all, so you were the first in your family to go to college, and arguably you've achieved the American dream. So can you share your story on how that all happened?
The American dream.
In 2 minutes.
It's becoming even more elusive. I think I read a CNN article just recently that 63% of young Americans don't feel that dream's attainable. They're wrong, ladies and gentlemen. They truly are wrong. With the help of a lot of you in this room, you can make a lot of folks' dream come true. My personal story was simple. I was just a high school student hanging around Huntington Beach, surfing, and hoping to graduate from high school and go work, get married, have kids, and live a happy ever after. Because that's what everyone else in my family had done. I had a great high school counselor, Mrs. Duckworth, who one day in the hallway stopped me after the PSATs, the preliminary SAT scores, and said, "Yeah, I noticed your scores. Where are you thinking of going to college?" I stopped. I looked at her. I thought I was in trouble because that's usually what counselors stop you for. I said, "What's a college?" Again, when you're the first in your family to go anywhere, I didn't know what a college was. Didn't know that that was an option. So, my story is simple. Somebody a long time ago cared enough to point me in the right direction. And the whole pay it forward concept for me has been something, that's why I've been so focused on some of those scholarship efforts for some of those kids.
It's a great story. Now, you took the helm at United at a very challenging time. So can you tell us a bit about how the board decided to ask you to step into the CEO role? Had you been part of the succession plan? How does this happen?
I don't know. I got a call one day and said, "Hey, have you thought about this?" No, the board clearly had a very strong succession plan process. It was dropped upon the company in a very sort of turbulent and rapid way. The board did an incredible job of searching around, sort of the system for other candidates. And again, having the fact that I'd been there for some time and had some history was a decision they made. I wasn't incredibly interested. I was at my other company about to become the senior person there. But there was something about getting back to the consumer business, getting back to a company who I felt in my heart needed what I did best and connect people with each other. And so, the board's work and process is something that I wasn't part of, clearly, but I'm glad they did.
Now, did your commercial rail background help you in the role at United? I mean, do you think the transportation experience was important to the board? And so how has that helped you?
Well, most of that board knew me for over a decade, and I do believe that the railroad space, if you think about both companies, both industries, incredibly asset intensive, long-lived assets, heavy labor organizations, and a need to trade off, and a need to balance efficiency and productivity with customer service. And so all of those combination of things, I think, helped me. And being an operating officer also was very important because the complex nature of both businesses are unbelievable. Frankly, when you see an airplane or a railroad go by, the logistics, the complexity of so many people having to do the right thing, like I said earlier, to make that plane fly and that rail run is pretty amazing and exciting. So the operational complexity, I think, is what really helped me at least get started on their operational improvements that we're making.
Do you find a lot of parallels in terms of an operations center between rail versus air?
Yeah, I think all of us have these incredibly visual and optic network operating centers, usually giant screens that have all sorts of visuals and colors. If you ask anybody that actually works for a living in those floors, if you ask them what's on those screens, they'll go, "I don't know. I've got my screens here. They work from there. That's all for show." So when you come visit with us, it's very important, but no one's using it.
Now, a fundamental challenge has been the United Continental integration. Now, somebody who was on the board during the process, what lessons have you taken away from integration? We were talking about, I went through a similar integration at the same time, so you learn a lot. I guess, is there anything you would have done differently if you'd been CEO then? You were on the board, so it's a very different point of view.
No, it's a completely different point of view. It's just, you're not involved in those things. Yeah, the simple lesson, it's a lesson we all learn, and we often have to relearn. It helps to listen and ask. It's hard to redesign what professionals in our business or the rail business do when you haven't done it yourself. So when you involve those people, they'll save you a lot of times, a lot of pain if you just ask the professionals that do it how they would do something and explain to them what you're trying to do. I think the combination of communication and involving them in the process helps an amazing part. Difficult, it's always hard, systems do what systems do, but at the end of the day, at the end of every single process is a human being, and they do that for a living. And it may look easy, it may look simple, right? Hey, you get a bag, you throw it in there, how hard can that be? Well, on a nice, clear day, it's not that hard. But when things go awry, that's when you need those professionals, and I don't think we did that as much. So I would do a lot more of that listening that I've done since I've arrived.
Do you feel that consultants who like to play an active role in that, are they helpful? I mean, they're the guides, but don't make decisions. How do they help that process? Oh. I know there's a lot of them here.
They're lovely folks. They're truly lovely. The best consultants are the ones, the best consultants are the ones that really make an effort to get it, to understand your business. I've worked with a bunch of folks, and the ones in particular that I've hired, I've always sensed an innate connection with the business. They know more than they have to. They feel and they're with you, and the ideas they bring you actually correlate with the needs that you have. They're not just bringing after work. They're not just bringing those just simple sort of business generating issues for them. They're actually thoughtful, have been in your business, and have found a niche where they can help, and they bring the right and proper tools. And so, yeah, they're very valuable. I mean, resources, assistance, borrowing, stealing ideas, all of that. It's all part of the equation. But yes, consultants can be our best friends sometimes.
Now, what were the steps you took in determining the new board members? I know that there have been a number of activists that have been more vocal lately. So did you have to rethink the structure of the board because of the activists?
No, listen, we, having been through a proxy battle before, again, human relations. Everyone has a viewpoint. You listen to that viewpoint. You get minds and intellect in the same room when you have thoughtful discourse, and you can come to very logical and practical conclusions. So what could have been a very ugly, nasty proxy battle drawn out to its bitter end with all the voting and everything, we actually settled in a very nice way. And now, other than the normal norming and forming of a new group, I think we possibly are going to have one of the best boards in the airline industry. And it's come together from people we've chosen, people that were chosen through the proxy or through the activists. I don't even call them activists. I mean, they were interested, very interested, incredibly interested share owners.
Now, but do you think that their priority list of issues is different from other independent board members, or do you bring it all together?
That's kind of my job, to harness all that new energy and direction. You have to start with the belief that everyone has a fundamentally positive viewpoint and agenda for the company. And I start with that all the time until proven otherwise. And so far, with all our board members, we've seen that. They have great ideas. They want to assist and help. And the only difficult part is the dividing line between what management does and what the board does. And so we cross it every once in a while. We self-correct. You and I talked a little bit about how that works. No, we're excited about the new board. A lot of value has been grown. I miss some of our other board members that did retire. They were incredible as well. But we have this new one, and we'll move forward.
Okay, good. Well, let's segue now and talk a little bit about the management team. And I was very interested when I read about Scott Kirby, formerly of American Airlines, who's in this newly created role of president. And so, what was your idea in creating that role? Were you thinking of creating the role and he became available, or did he have a talent that you thought would fit well with your team?
Yes, all of the above. Really, you ask why I created, I just felt I had too many titles, so I gave up my chairmanship, and now I gave up the presidentship. It's a joke. No, listen, I suspect that at some point in time we'll all write a book about this. It's been an incredibly interesting year from all the things that we've experienced at the company. And one of the things that you do is you build a strategy, and then you build an organizational structure that supports it. Over the course of this year, there's been a lot of noise, and why haven't you done this? Why haven't you filled out this position? Why haven't you done that? Because we didn't know what we wanted to do as a company. We knew the people issue, we knew the customer issue that we wanted to work, but from a strategic angle of how we fly, where we fly, we needed to make sure we had the right folks. And the analog I use often is a coach of a football team. If you're going to be a passing team, you're probably going to have to go find a quarterback, a receiver, and the right sort of blocking folks if you're going to be running otherwise. And so as we developed our strategy and things fell into place in a lot of different ways, I think we found the right resources, not only with Scott, but with Julia Haywood, our Chief Revenue Officer, Andrew Levy, our Chief Financial Officer, and the rest of the executive team, who has done an amazing job. A lot of you know Brett Hart in the communities, an outstanding member of the Chicago community, and our operating folks, our technology. It's just, we have a great team.
I find that interesting when you think about the different titles. I hold a couple different titles, and you have different roles. So in this change, what has this new appointment allowed you to spend more time on that you might not have otherwise?
This is an incredibly complicated business. And what you find yourself spending time on is the 1,000 things you weren't spending time on before. So you divide and conquer. I think the new team has the day-to-day business running. They're very expert at it. They've done it for a long period of time with some great intellect, great experience, and a great depth. The issues on the legislative front, on the regulatory front, on the global footprint. This airline world is an absolute global industry. It's run by a host of different people and interesting human beings with different cultures, different mindsets, different histories and backgrounds of the ownership of these folks. It's akin, and I don't watch the show, but I've used the phrase and people laugh, so I'll use it again. It's akin to a little bit of the Game of Thrones on a global basis. You're never quite sure who's your friend, but you know that everyone has a sharp object near them.
Now, it's interesting that Scott came from American, which I've heard has a different culture. Are there any challenges in bringing a new culture into the current culture and evolving that?
For me, culture is a word that's thrown around a little bit too much. The pushback really on the whole team that we've gathered is, the biggest sort of point that's being made is like, wow, Oscar, that's a lot of horsepower in one room. And I'm like, yes, isn't it? What a great thing. The jobs that we do, we're paid to harness that energy. And so people come into an environment, you build a team, everybody gets to work with each other, and you build your own environment, the way you work. And we vet people very much before they come into the organization. And so it's my job to make sure that all the pieces fit. I'm very comfortable the way it's been working.
Good. Now, it was interesting when you gave the story about when you were in the middle seat in the back. So here's my question. So how do you and your leadership team get that experience and don't get upgraded? I asked you about being anonymous. I don't know if you put on a hat or, but how do you get this unfiltered view of the customer and the person sitting in the middle seat and back? How do you get that experience?
Well, you do it by experiencing your own product. You fly often, we do, and invariably in all those flyings, as many of you know in the room, things don't always go right. I had a recent flight that was probably everything that could go wrong did. And I was sitting in the back again, and I got to hear and listen, and we make course adjustments. We have I'm sure you've seen it, we have a very cute, funny safety video. If you pay attention to it, it's great, right? It's cute. When you've been delayed for a couple hours on the tarmac, and you have to go back, and you have to let people off, and then you have to shut the door again, and by FAA regulations, you have to play the video again. You don't play that funny, cute video a second time, right? It's like, so we stopped that immediately. It's like, okay, no, if you have to do that, somebody just get on the damn thing and say, hey, buckle up, hang in there, and let's go.
I thought you were going to say there's a backup video to the backup video. So.
Well, that's kind of where we started, but somebody just said, why don't we just say it the old-fashioned way? It's like, what a great idea.
Yeah. I like that, making decisions in the process. Sure. Now, United has employees across the globe, and we were talking about how people are spread out around the world. So what are some of the best practices that you use to support employee diversity and collaboration among the many cultures? Can you talk to them all at once, or how do you spread the word?
Diversity and inclusion and, frankly, general acceptance of others on this planet is something that we kind of lose touch with sometime. And so it is important for us as a company because of 86,000 people, guess what? We're made up of an incredible amount of diversity and inclusion just by the nature of the math. And we fly to an incredible array of countries and cultures around the world where that's required in our job. The best practices are, again, very simple. You just hug and love everyone. I mean, just there is in our business, the concept of inclusion is you can have your viewpoints, you can have your lifestyle, you can have whatever viewpoints you want, but when you're inside the company, helping us serve you, we're all together in that. And you just foster that atmosphere, you foster that environment, and it works, it truly works.
Did people write you emails and say, Oscar, I have this idea, and how do you take those ideas and implement them?
A lot of different ways. Yes, lots of emails. And the ones that start, I have an idea, are actually probably the more pleasant ones to read. It is, I always get in trouble when I say things, but there's that old phrase that the customer is always right. That's not necessarily the case. I just had somebody I'll call Cheese Guy. He was commenting on the fact that all this stuff that I'm talking about is just lip service. You don't really mean that. You're just BS. And I called yesterday and left a set of instructions and suggestions, and no one's acted on them yet. So this is all lip service. And he attached his email from the day before, literally. Number one, you need to fly direct from EWR to Buenos Aires and to Johannesburg. Okay, in less than 24 hours. We're good. We're not that good. Then this is funny. He went on, and then he says, "Let me tell you about the cheese. The cheese you serve on first class. Everybody knows that you don't serve Camembert and Brie next to each other." So that's when your attention span starts sort of lessening. Then he went on to say about something derogatory about our flight attendants, about their level of knowledge about wines, because hey, you should serve wines from the country I'm visiting, as opposed to just any wine. If I'm going to Paris, I want French wines. And on that subject, he said, how can you not know? How can your flight attendants not know the difference between a left bank and a right bank Bordeaux? Click, I'm gone. Now I wrote him back and wrote a nice little note saying, hey, listen, we get 140 million passengers, lots of different emails. Thank you for your thoughtful suggestions, and then tried to explain a little bit. He wrote back a few hours later, hey, I appreciate you having a bunch of other customers, but I only want you to take care of one, me. Yeah.
I'm glad he works for you.
No, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. He may work for you, Ilene.
Yeah.
I can find that out.
I hope he's a coach. Now, well, what keeps you awake at night? How do you deal with the threat of terrorism? I know that's something that we all think about as a CEO.
Gosh, it's such an interesting and difficult topic. For us, the terrorism, from what we've seen historically, is something we work with national security agencies and all the right folks, and we keep a constant vigilance. Cybersecurity is the other issue that's constantly we're worried about because of the impact that it can have on our systems and have on your flying and frankly on your personal information. So we have what everybody does. We spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of effort, in a sense buying very expensive insurance for something that's so dynamic and so changing every day. And so it doesn't necessarily keep us up at night, but when something happens, it does wake us up at night.
But do you have a set of issues that you're always going through in terms of what would be the worst case scenario, and then do you have an action plan to deal with those?
We sure do. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, I personally participated in a drill that actually had the scenario of a plane that went down, and with fatalities and hazardous material on board, and all of that, just horrible case scenario. And we actually played it out from how I would speak in front of TV, where I would be. I actually went to one of our operating centers out near the airport and participated in a few hour drills when we have hundreds of people that fly in from all over the world to participate as, in essence, actors. They play the grieved loved ones looking for their family member. They should win Oscars. They are so good at what they do. And so we play it out, how we would do, who responds. We have TSA, we have FBI, we have Secret Service. We have all of those folks representing all those agencies that we would work for, where the hotels would be. And so, yes, we go through all of that constantly to make sure that we're ready to go.
Now, one of the things about the industry, and a lot of people ask about the industry model and success, and I found it interesting that the Uber products head, Jeff Holden, recently said that Uber was actually looking into short-haul flying in cities. So what are your thoughts on that? Will there be an Uber of the airline industry?
Oh, listen, anyone who tells you, that'll never happen, it'll take forever, you could be kidding themselves. We know how the laws of new technology works, and things can become very disruptive very quickly. And so we worry about that to some degree, even the Uber case in particular. I think even by their own internal optimistic sort of outlines, don't see that happening at any time in the near future. What I do worry and what I focus on with our company is what I call relevant innovation. What is relevant to me and to you today? So things like air traffic control modernization. It's a bit of a shambles. It needs a lot of investment. And right now we use ground-to-satellite sort of systems. We need modern systems like the rest of the world. And so that, to all of us in this room, is much more relevant than whether Uber is going to be able to fly from Chicago to Springfield in some sort of jet. So relevant innovation, always worry about the outside, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Okay. You know, a lot of people talk about the quality of the US-based airlines versus international, and we all do a lot of international travel. And some people think that the US airlines are inferior, and maybe there's different measurement. What are your thoughts on that? And how do you define competition? Is it domestic or global, or how do you think about that?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, competition is simple. It's the perception of the customer. So I could tell you why a Gulf carrier airline is so much quote-unquote better, because they're funded by their state and they don't have any constraints of being a public company having to raise it. I could say all of those things, but I wouldn't. You know, better's in the eye of the beholder. We're going to be who we are in this industry, in this country, and I think the differentiator is going to be sort of that smile and that spirit that you see from our United employees today. Because, you know, we're always going to be here, and outside threats and competitors are always going to be there as well. The way to compete is to compete, and to compete on a level playing field, hopefully. But when you can't do that, you just do the best you can. So yeah, we worry about that. But you know, the Polaris that you heard, and the bags that you have. By the way, sorry, when we announced the bags, there was a slight clap. I think the rumor earlier today was that we were going to have immediate global service upgrades, and maybe that's the, yeah. So that wasn't happening. So, but you know, back to the concept of comparing us to others. When we rolled out that Polaris product, and we did a big thing in Manhattan, somebody was a famous blogger in the industry space, wrote in the middle of that day, and I read it that night at the big event we had. He says, the new Polaris seats for United versus, he mentioned one of the Gulf carriers. He goes 777 to 777, and then he did a ... and he said, United wins. So us being compared to these, you know, supposedly great carriers, we have a great product backed by incredibly great people who take care of great cities like this. So we're very proud of that.
Right. Now, you mentioned the Chicago weather, and having lived here for a number of years, my question is, if you could have a hub anywhere else in the world, where would it be? I mean, what could be more than such a global city?
I love all my hubs, and particularly this one. So I wouldn't trade it for the world. I trade the weather sometimes, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure Miami's that much better. I mean, okay. So now I'm coming to my last question. And so I know you started to give us all a few tips about travel and the Polaris, but what is your best travel tip for all of us as frequent flyers? If you could tell us one thing we ought to do that would help us, besides flying United.
Oh, I was going to say, that's a hanging curveball there. I'll get just a little deep. A little empathy for others would be really helpful to all of us. I spoke to a couple folks in the disabled community earlier today, and we at United and all the other airlines, we try to do our absolute best to help those folks. What we can't control is the non-handicapped folks who can't wait to get off the plane because they have something to do and they couldn't be bothered by someone else. And so a little empathy as you travel in traffic, as you try to find a parking spot, as you're trying not to strangle someone while waiting in a long TSA line. I want you happy when you get on my seats in front of my flight attendants. So I have one point if I could make while I'm here, and anytime I get into a large group, I feel compelled to give a bit of a public service statement with regards to my health situation. As I said, I had a massive heart attack, and that was after running a triathlon 2 weeks before my event. I was a vegan, and so absolutely had no history of these kinds of things. And what saved me, and what I propose to give to you so that maybe you can save someone or yourself, is I have a good friend who's a cardiologist, as a friend, and we run these triathlons together. He would always tell us after we were sitting around, after doing a walk, a run or a bike or a swim, he'd always say, you know, some of the people that die on my operating table are relatively young and relatively fit. And so he would admonish us with a simple, if you ever feel anything weird, call 911. Just call him immediately. You know, weird, you know what weird is, he would say. And then he added a couple phrases that really that stuck with me. And he says, and when you call 911, immediately tell them where you are. I was like, duh, okay, that makes sense. He goes, because you may not make it past the phone call. And I remember thinking, all right, Mark, that's a little dramatic, right? And we'd all go back to doing what we were doing. Well, October 15th of last year, I went to work out and came back to my apartment, and I felt something weird. My legs were just kind of wobbly, is all it was. I didn't have chest pains, or there's 100 symptoms doctors in the room will tell you. And I heard my phone buzz, and then when I went to walk towards it, my legs gave out, and I almost fell, and I grabbed onto the counter. And I remember thinking to myself, that's weird. Then I felt a little clammy, and I said, I'm going to call. My friend's voice came back in. So I grabbed my landline, for those of you that know what that still means, and as opposed to my cell phone, called 911, immediately told them where I was, and guess what? I didn't make it past the phone call. But somehow I got to my front door, unlocked it, and within 38 minutes I was on life support. So for all of you in the room, regardless of your fitness, regardless of your health, regardless of your family history, heart disease is the biggest killer in America by far. There's no known test for some of the things that you do, but for God's sake, if you ever feel anything weird, get help immediately. Especially for us guys, right? You know, people say, I'll just sit down, you know, I'll lay down, I'll get through it. It saved my life, so I hope it hopefully saves you. And, I'm sorry.
And the other helpful tip to combine that story with the airline is people have said, you should get up and walk around. And so I know that on the planes that I've been on, people have been very encouraging and supporting. And so even if that's slightly inconvenient and you're in a window seat, to get up and walk around, that can also be very helpful for health. And we were talking about that a little bit during dinner.
I think it's great. And as long as the fasten your seatbelt sign is not on.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you again, Oscar. We appreciate tonight. It's been great. Thank you.